Very much for coming to this book launch today. I hope that you pick your copy of the book. It was recently published. This is the second book in cooperation between the Civitas Foundation and the Transparency International Hungary, and of course they did most of the work. I think it's a very good book. There is an identical Hungarian version and an English version. It's about, although the topic is not so cheerful, it's the golden years of Hungarian corruption, and so this is recorded in here. What I have to tell you that Transparency, who did this, Dr. Martin and his associates who edited it, they never lost one labor suit. They were taken to court many times, and so far they didn't use one case, which tells something about how solid the information in the book. It's probably not true for the future, because the present government is actively replacing the judges, so that's not very good for the future. What we're going to do is that I will ask Dr. Martin to introduce shortly the book, and then we will talk a little bit about the consequences which can be drawn from the book. We're not going to discuss individual cases, though they're very interesting, and from every segment of Hungarian society, culture, sport, business, everything is in there, and it's a very the way it's presented is almost like a Hungaricum. They developed to the present corrupt system is developed to almost perfection. So let me introduce you the panelist, Daniel Freund, who probably most of you know is the member of the European Parliament. Dr. József Martin is the director of Transparency International. Zoltán Kész is a former Hungarian member of parliament, and now he is in the very close circle of the prime minister candidate of the unified opposition. So he's here in this capacity, and also as the research director of Civitas Institute, and I'm István Teplán. I'm an advisor to the Civitas Institute. So I ask you, József, to present it quickly.
Okay, thank you very much, István. I warmly welcome everybody on behalf of Transparency International Hungary. So I'm not entirely sure whether I have a presenter to okay, but the presenter. Oh, you will do it. Okay. So then perhaps I go there. Oh, no. If you do it, then I can. I can be here. Okay. So. Just very briefly, because we lack time, and we need time for the discussion as well. So the content of the Black Book you can see on the slide. So it's basically structured in a way that we have an introductory study by professor of MIT, Darren Ecemoglu, about the price of corruption. Then we have four papers, four studies, extensive ones about the nature of corruption in Hungary. The first one deals with the erosion of rule of law. Then the second is the economic impact of corruption. Then the corruption in public procurement and the EU funds fraud, and last but not least, the corruption in the media sector. Then we have 50 concrete cases, individual transactional type of corruption as well as systemic like of corruption. And last but not least, we have another study by a CEU professor, András Sajó, about how to restore the rule of law. So just a brief, really very brief introduction about the nature of corruption in Hungary. So the Hungarian corruption can be characterized as extremely centralized. This is the most centralized corruption system in our assessment across the European Union, very much a top-down and systemic-like corruption. This is enabled by a phenomenon that Transparency International Hungary has called for 10 years now as state capture. This is a kind of political state capture in which the politicians, members of the governing elite, as well as oligarchs and crony companies have captured the state in pursuit of a political and business monopoly. The situation of rule of law has been very much worrisome for many, many years, as you know, and as it is in strong association with state capture. And this situation, this erosion of the rule of law has accelerated in the pandemic by the rule by decree that has been going on for almost 2 years now. When it comes to public procurement and EU funds, we can see that EU funds fraud as well as the distortion, serious distortion of the public procurement systems are one of the biggest corruption cases in Hungary. So last year we experienced a record high public procurement market in Hungary, and lots of public procurement under the pretext of the pandemic have went to crony companies. So it's not at all true that the rise of public procurement market was due only to the pandemic and to the healthcare procurements, but for example in tourism sector as well as in construction sectors, lots of public procurement procedures can be detected. There is a lack of competition in more than 40% of the cases, and serious concentration and distortion of the public procurement market. In our assessment, approximately 1/3 of the public procurement procedures go to the closest circle of government oligarchs and cronies. And of course, we have this unique phenomenon which is in connection with the richest Hungarian, Lőrinc Mészáros, who has become the richest person within just 5 years, and which is a world record in this respect. When it comes to impact of corruption on the economic performance, I should say that even if there was a substantial growth in Hungary from 2013 until the pandemic, this growth was not translated into an inclusive and sustainable development in the country, and this is due to corruption and also and the institutional distortion and erosion of rule of law. And also we might also add that the other countries, our peer countries, had even bigger growth than Hungary, so there is a opportunity cost on behalf of the economic performance as well. You can see here the latest results of the Corruption Perception Index. Here you you can see that only Bulgaria is behind Hungary according to this indicator. So all the other countries perform better in terms of corruption. And what is even more worrisome that this is the trend. So Hungary is the country which lost the most points across all the Central and Eastern European countries, 12 points. Meanwhile, for example, Estonia or Latvia gained 10 points in the past decade. We can see in the other chart how corruption and the national income are interlinked. We found a very strong correlation between these two variables. As I said, Hungary has been stuck among the laggards of the European Union, and not only among the European Union, but also of the Central and Eastern European countries. And last but not least, the colonization of the media, which according to the Freedom House assessment has become partly free. Well, this assessment was done first in 2012, but since then the situation has worsened a lot, and the situation in the media can be characterized both by regulation capture as well as the market capture. And then we have two studies, as I said in the beginning and in the end of the book. And in the first study, Deren Ecemoglu, MIT professor, said that, or wrote that corruption has skyrocketed in Orban's Hungary. And it has become, as I have already said, the part of the system that has been built. He also says that countering corruption, and I think it's not very often mentioned approach, that countering corruption, not only institutions are needed, but also the resistance of people. So we need better institutions. We would need inclusive institutions instead of extractive institutions, but also we would need the resistance of the people who would opt for less corruption and more democracy. And last but not least, we have a very interesting article of András Sajó, in which he contemplates what can be done if the opposition wins the elections, but does not have the constitutional majority, and he concludes that both legal formalism as well as the radical restoration of rule of law, meaning that changing the constitution by a simple majority, they can be either of them cannot be a viable solution, but the proposed solution to reach something, a compromise or a political deal between the future and the current government, in case of if the opposition wins with a simple majority. So that is the brief outline, the brief content of the book, and I will hand over back to István to pursue the conversation.
The first question would be to you, because I know you have to leave. As early as 2015, a year after the Fidesz government lifted the ban for politicians and their families to apply for government funds and EU funds, there was a transparency requirement which was lifted in overnight. They call it Salad law. Right after that, one of the Fidesz ideologues, a certain András Lánci, who is a less than mediocre philosopher, but this statement by him, which was remarkably cynical and surprisingly open, he said that for Fidesz, corruption is not an anomaly. This is a development strategy, and this is a tolerable and a calculable cost of a rapid development, and this is how you help to a domestic, I I don't like to use the word bourgeoisie because it means a little more noble than these people are. But do you help the Hungarian entrepreneurs close to the government to accumulate wealth? And since this accumulation was mostly fed by European taxpayers' money. How you relate to that, and will this recent decision of the European Court of Justice will change anything in your view? I don't know whether you know that in Hungary it's presented that we lost the case of changing the sex of children or something. This is why we are under attack. But nevertheless, how you relate to this, that right in front of the EU, this is a development strategy for an EU member state. Plus, will anything change after this court decision?
Well, thanks for inviting me here today. I hope this is.
That's for the camera.
Yeah, okay. I hope this works. So I think some of the numbers that TI has just presented here show very clearly no, corruption is not a part of a development strategy, and actually quite the opposite, that you have higher economic growth, you have better economic development in those countries where corruption is lower, and particularly the peer countries in the Baltics, I think very clearly outline that if EU accession is also paired with an ambitious fight against corruption, the economic development and actually lots of indicators are way better than is the case in Hungary. The question now whether this court ruling by the European Court of Justice is a game changer, well, I think that the underlying instrument, the rule of law conditionality, is a game changer. It's a useful tool if the political will is actually there to use it. From everything that the Commission has been saying since this tool actually entered into force over 14 months ago, this court ruling hopefully has taken away the last obstacle, the last excuse for the Commission to use it. Because for about a year, Commission President von der Leyen has said, you know, whenever the court has ruled, right away this is going to be used. There was a period in the autumn where there was different language from the Commission, where they actually said, you know, first in the State of the Union, very soon, then it went to weeks, days, and the initial plan was to have launched the conditionality against Poland and Hungary after the October summit. That was that week where the Polish so-called constitutional tribunal made that ruling about the supremacy of EU law, and that somehow motivated the then already voted out Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany to go to von der Leyen and say, let's not use this now. Let's not rush things. Let's seek dialogue with those two countries, and then the Commission President forced, I don't know, the commissioners in charge, so Hahn, Jourova, Reinders, to transform the letters that were already written to trigger the conditionality into those informal letters that were then sent instead. We've seen the replies by the Polish and the Hungarian government. Well, and the question now is, now that the court ruling is there, are they, you know, all the evidence is there. The Commission knows all this. I mean, this is very helpful, but the case to use the conditionality mechanism is there and has been there for quite a while. We actually commissioned a legal study for the Commission for the case against Hungary and handed that over to them already last May. It's almost a year by now that they've had that case. So the question is, will they go now? If I would have to make a prediction, I wouldn't expect anything to happen before the Hungarian elections. It's a bit difficult to tell how much the current international situation, the situation in Ukraine, impacts on all this. It most certainly takes away the attention of everyone concerned at the moment. How much it changes the arguments to now, you know, relent, particularly I guess in the case of Poland, I cannot say yet. But what I would say is that in a situation where a dictator is rolling his tanks into an EU country, a country where people are now fighting and dying for the chance of one day to become members of the European Union, to have the rule of law, to have democracy. This is what people are dying for in Kiev and in the rest of the country right now. In that situation, to send a signal here that actually the rule of law we don't really care all that much about, and for example now green lighting the Corona funds for Poland, I think would be a horrible signal to send, and I very much hope that no one in the Commission and indeed among the member states is developing thoughts in that direction.
Thank you. You said that corruption actually has an adverse effect on economic development, and unfortunately there are miraculous things happened. People got miraculously rich, but they did not. The Hungarian miracle altogether is still there to happen, and these people who are in this book, some of them who were in the previous book, when Mr. Orban pulled the plug, they were in free fall of losing their positions as domestic entrepreneurs or whatever. But I think what is worth to spend a little time on that. Besides this corruption index, where Hungary performs much worse than it used to, there's also the Hungarian poverty. Which is Hungary used to be one of the forerunners of the post-Soviet countries, and now is one of the poorest countries. Do you see the correlation between this increasing poverty and the corruption?
Well, if I'm well informed, Hungary has the second highest poverty rate in the European Union. Inequality higher than pretty much anywhere else in the Union, and you see that on the ground. Well, obviously, if a lot of public funding is stolen or siphoned off, if public tenders routinely are overcharged to pay for all that corruption, well then obviously there's less money going to those that are supposed to get that money. I have in my visits to Hungary twice visited a homeless shelter, and you see, if people criticize the corruption of the current government, well then they're put under pressure, they're attacked for what they do, and they get their public funding cut. And we just had about a week ago the last attack on Gabor Ivani that I visited. That has unlawfully get his public funding cut years ago. There is a European Court of Human Rights ruling that certifies he's entitled to that money, but he hasn't gotten it for years from the government. And because he hasn't gotten that government money, well, he hasn't been able to pay certain taxes and what he owes to the government, which I'm sure would be happy to pay if he gets the money, the much more important sum from the government. But now he's being harassed by the tax authorities because he doesn't make those payments. So and his case is not an anomaly. We see that in many instances, and I mean TI has listed all those projects where money is being wasted, where I have seen presentations of all those useless lookout towers that litter the Hungarian countryside, useless little trains from useless football stadiums. I mean, all this is money that is not going towards useful economic development or social projects that would help to reduce poverty, to reduce inequality, and indeed spark a proper economic development. Whenever there is inefficiencies, and when there is a strong inefficiency such as 25% overpayment on public tenders for corruption, all this takes away from economic development that could be there and that could benefit Hungarian citizens way more than it has done in the past 12 years.
Since you leave, I just one more question, then I turn it over to Zoltán to his experience. That if you define Orbanism with one sentence, a lot of people say it's really a third world model. They use the political power to enrich their families and their circle of people who in return are expected to help finance in the media and every other way to keep the Orban regime in power. And this is a model from the third world, Papadok or whoever. But how long the European Union will tolerate this? I know it's mostly for the Hungarians to do something, but what other tools have the European Union has to enforce European values? I know that now the magic thing is this rule of law, but is there anything that's someone who is deliberately not only disregarding European values, but even advertises on billboards against the European values? Is there any other tool? And you said it's a very sad thing that there is a country where young people dying for something which another one 300 kilometers away from there with European monies is completely disregarding and destroying.
So I agree with the assessment that Orban's system revolves around making sure that as much money as possible is going into him being able to maintain his grip to power, and then enriching his immediate family and friends. So what can the EU do about it? I would see four main tools that we have at the moment, and most of them we've had for a long time, right? There's infringement procedures, and when ECJ rulings are ignored, there's penalty payments. There is the rule of law conditionality. There is the withholding of corona funds. That is also working. At the moment, we see that in Poland, that it really puts pressure on the government. And the fourth is the Article 7 procedure that has been dysfunctional now for many years. But I wouldn't dismiss it completely, because there might well be a situation in the future where, if there is a government change either in Hungary or Poland, this tool might well come back online, so to speak, and might be usable again. And let's not say that the EU has ignored this, because there's stark differences between the different EU institutions. The European Parliament has condemned this for years. We tried to make this rule of law conditionality even stronger than it has now ended up. We're suing the Commission for inaction on protecting the rule of law. And I would say also that the European Court of Justice has done remarkable work and speaks loud and clear in its rulings for the defense of the rule of law. What we haven't seen is the political will, particularly among the member states. There is still a logic of, these are the internal affairs of a member state. But when the rule of law collapses in a way that it is doing in Hungary and in Poland, this is not the internal affairs of those member states. This puts into question the legal order of the European Union. This puts into question the functioning of the single market in those countries. And it certainly puts into question the basic rights of European citizens, whether Hungarian, Polish, or any other EU citizens that are at any one point in those countries and have parts of their fundamental rights violated, or no longer have access to independent courts if ever there's a dispute of any kind. So this is what we need. We need the will of the member states to speak truth and to say this openly, and then of course to do something about it. The Commission can only do the first step of the rule of law conditionality, but it needs a qualified majority. And at the moment, I don't know if it came to a vote on this today in the council, whether that qualified majority would actually be there. I hope so, but nobody. I don't know if anyone in the council has actually counted the votes on this one.
Yes, just if I may add just one sentence to that, is that by no means the problem is that there is no mechanisms or means to counter systemic corruption or systemic breach of rule of law. The problem, in my opinion, was that the EU started it very lately. So the damage was already done, and there were long years when the EU simply turned a blind eye to that, despite that, at least in our assessment, the mechanisms were in place. So that's I think a problem that now we face such an amount of corruption and rule of law problems that it's much harder to tackle now than if the EU tackled it beforehand, let's say 3, 4, 5, or even years ago, or even earlier. So that I think is a big problem which cannot be redone, obviously, but it's good that at the end of the day, the EU has this rule of law mechanism.
Zoltán, if you, as a former member of parliament and a public intellectual in Hungary, if you could say something that how you see what damage this corruption, what is the price of corruption in Hungary, as Professor Acemoglu elaborates in his theoretical study, but in real life, because you know the countryside very well, the slowed down social mobility, etc. Mm-hmm. So what is, how you see, what is the damage?
All right. Well, actually, I was smiling a little bit when Daniel mentioned 25% overpayment. I wish it was only 25% in every, even in average. I would say it's. I mean, we've heard of cases when it was even more than 50% or even more than that. So, yeah, but what you have to pay back or what you have to give back or whatever you call it. Oh yeah, definitely. And when I was a member of parliament, I met with cases like that all the time. And when it came to us opposition parliamentarians to report it to the courts, because Fidesz always said, well, if you find something, report it. But when it comes to the independent judiciary system of Hungary, you know where these cases end. Basically nowhere. You mentioned, István, the question about the countryside. Well, for years it has been my emphasis when it comes to state capture itself, how the countryside has been shaped and reshaped in a way that is, I think, a very, very scary thing to see and to experience. In connection with the state capture, I have to say that the scariest thing is probably how they capture the media landscape. And I think one or two things were mentioned here, but experiencing it on the ground, and me as a person living in the countryside and experiencing the fact that average voters still read print newspapers, and when it comes to the county print newspapers, for example, all the print is in their hands. All the radio stations that are in the countryside available are in their hands. And when it comes to state capture, I think this is a very, in a way, important thing that has to be stressed. There is no other source of information that these people have. And let me just tap on to present-day situation, what is happening in Ukraine, how Russia has been shaping the Hungarian media landscape in the past decade, and how the state capture has been aided by Russian propaganda. Because this is what's happening. Some of you might remember last week how the Hungarian propagandists handled the crisis. When Ukraine was attacked, on some of the websites there was nothing, literally nothing about Russia attacking Ukraine. So when it comes to people in the countryside, and you ask people, average voters, if they know about it, they have zero idea about what's going on in the world. They have zero information about the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. Another very interesting thing, second, third day when they finally realized, Orban and his people finally realized that they have to have some kind of a narrative. What was the narrative of the Orban government? On the surface, yes, we condemn Putin. Well, they were the last, by the way. Yes, we condemn Putin. Yes, we all agree with everything the European Union does. We agree with everything NATO does. That's on the surface. Below the surface, what is happening below the surface? What is happening to these captured media outlets and how they portray the situation in the Ukraine? Let me just draw up, because I made some screenshots about, for example, during the weekend, Zoltán, who is one of the founding members of Fidesz and one of the mouthpieces of the government, mentioned that Ukraine is a puppet set up and operated by the CIA. He said that even back then Maidan was organized by the US, and its only goal is to intimidate Russia and gain Ukraine natural and energy resources. He also mentioned that there are almost 200,000 Hungarians in Ukraine held hostage by Ukrainians and whose rights are gradually taken away. That is unacceptable. It was also mentioned in one of the propaganda outlets that the escalation of the conflict is only the interest of the United States. For the American puppet state called Ukraine, which is physically persecuting Hungarian minorities in Transcarpathia. It was also mentioned that standing by Ukraine is an act of high treason. So this is below the surface. This is what people in the countryside read, and they don't see, what Orban is showing to the rest of the world, how nice he is now aligning with the European Union and the European Commission and everything that they stand for. Now, one other comment that I want to make here in connection with how corruption and state capture in the past decade have been financed, because it needs to be financed by somehow. And the bad news, obviously, everybody knows. We have some German friends here and some other people here. Your taxpayers' money basically was going into financing the corruption of Viktor Orban and the Fidesz party. But they are aware that with the present-day mechanisms, their corruption, their system, needs to be financed again. They need to find, or needed to find, new partners to finance their corruption. And I think this new partner, well, not so new, this partner is Putin. Putin has been financing a lot of the corruption cases and a lot of the things Orban has been doing, not only on the economic level, obviously, but the political level. Because what's Orban's vision for Europe? Orban's vision for Europe is to have strong nation states. He still wants to be an EU member. He wants to be some kind of a leader in the region. But he needs to also fulfill Putin's request of destabilizing the European Union, destabilizing NATO. Putin has been doing it. That's his number one goal, basically. He's been supporting not only Orban, but other parties around and other positions around the European Union. Think of Salvini, think of Le Pen. Just a second, Roland, I'll give you the floor. Okay. And so that's obviously in his interest. And when it comes to sustaining and maintaining the system, I think for Orban, Russia has been a very good partner. China has been a very good partner. Think of the Russian spy bank in Budapest. Unfortunately, Russian spy bank is not affected by the EU sanctions, so they can still operate. Think about the settlement bonds. Not too many people talk about the settlement bonds. In the settlement bond business, Orban has been given out tens of thousands of settlement bonds to Russian criminals, Chinese criminals, even criminals from the Middle East, to settle down in Hungary, actually settle down in the European Union, get a European Union passport, and when it comes to sanctions, they would be exempt from these sanctions because, well, we have a European Union passport. So we don't have to deal with it. You have to go, Daniel. Sorry. So basically, there are political percussions of this whole thing as well. And I think we could spend hours here talking about corruption, talking about the economic repercussions, but also it's worth talking about the political as well, especially in the light of what's happening right now in Central and Eastern Europe.
Thank you. I was hoping that if someone has a question to Daniel Freund, but we run out of his time, so next time. But still, before we go on, if you have any question to Dr. Martin or Zoltán Kész, would you like to?
Yes, right.
I can give you mine.
Well, that's all right.
It's a small room anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I'm Roland Freudenstein, Vice President of GlobeSec, which is a think tank based in Slovakia, and I'm building up the Brussels branch, and we define ourselves as a constructive voice from Central Europe, and you know what we mean. So it's great to see you guys here, Zoltán, Levente, and other colleagues. I have 2 points, and forgive me if these are not that much questions, but comments, but you can turn every comment into a question by saying, what do you think about it? So I'm going to do that. So first one is about this chicken and egg question of state capture and corruption. I mean, which is most important? Which is Orban trying to use corruption to shore up his rule, or is he just trying to get rich? And I think there is no answer to this question. And I think it's a waste of time to even try to distinguish these things because he wouldn't separate this. I mean, definitely. I mean, if you absolutely want an answer, my answer would be it's both. And just like with the chicken and egg, it's useless to actually say which one is more important or which one comes first. And the second point is, and this is really important, what Daniel Freund mentioned in the very beginning. The new narrative that is now being developed by Poland and Hungary, and I've seen it from Zoltán Spoks and Varga Judit and other representatives of the Hungarian government, which is, seriously, you want to weaken the countries that are now taking the brunt of the crisis situation with the refugees coming west and so on. Can you please stop the bickering about rule of law when we're talking about people dying over there in the east? And we need to develop answers to this. And I absolutely agree with Daniel Freund that the answer needs to be precisely it's the other way around. You know, it's like people are exactly dying for the rule of law. And that means that we have to be more serious about it. We need to double down because, and this is my last line, because defending democracy here and checks and balances here is just the other side of the coin of the global solidarity of democrats. These are two things that are the same. And the attempt to make it two different questions and to say that, look, defending what you call defending democracy is actually weakening our struggle to help the victims over there, that needs to be combated with all our energy. And we should all come up with good, detailed arguments in this. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think the colleague from OSI, you're from OSI, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, then please.
It's okay, I think we can all do it. So,
But I think that for the recording, it's better if you come, if you don't mind.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl Dolan. I'm from the Open Society European Policy Institute based here in Brussels, and it's a question to my good friend József. It's about, you presented ample evidence, of course, of irregularities in that euphemism, corruption, basically, in public procurement regarding the pandemic, throughout the pandemic, procurement of supplies, PPE, etc. And my question to you is, how much of that is cutting through to ordinary voters? I mean, even despite the lockhold that the government has on the media, there are still outlets for this information to get through. And if I compare that experience to another polity that I know very well, in the UK, for example, there was also ample evidence of corruption in public procurement for testing kits, PPE, lots of other pandemic equipment, that went to government cronies. But none of that actually cut through in terms of political support. And in fact, the only kind of corruption that did cut through, as we've seen recently, in terms of reducing the support for the Conservative government, was around illegal parties that were held during the pandemic. And is there a lesson here also, I just wonder, about the kinds of corruption that elicit a public revulsion, and how does that, I suppose, how does that influence the kind of communications that we need to do around corruption? So that would be my basic question. But maybe the fundamental question is, what's the level of awareness amongst the broader public in Hungary of the kinds of corruption during the pandemic, which obviously had a devastating effect on the general public?
Actually, there's two questions that you both can. Three. That I think you raised an important question. That when was the Orban government always this corrupt, or there was a point when they lost their innocence? I think it's a very long time ago, if you ask me, but you will answer. The second question is also very important. That what are the consequences and awareness and will people know about this? Because I think it don't surprise you that we don't get too many reviews, detailed reviews in the state media of this black book publication, obviously. But whether this has any impact on the general public or just between us here. And I think this is also Zoltán can and also the time of innocence and the egg and the chicken.
Okay, so thank you very much for these very good questions. I think I will take the first and the third, so the state capture and corruption question, and also the awareness of the population about corruption, and I will let you the other two, or just you can jump in. Yeah. So about state capture and corruption. We might say it's a chicken and egg problem, although I do see a sequence here. So I think that state capture was first. So state capture enabled the systemic lack of corruption. So that's why we are saying that state capture is the biggest corruption risk. So basically it enabled corruption, at least for two reasons. One is that it gives impunity to corrupt perpetrators among the economic elite, inside the economic elite, and secondly, because it enables those channels which have deliberately been built in order to funnel the public money towards the cronies. So I do think that the first step was to cement power and pursue the state capture, and then came these corrupt practices. Otherwise, if there was no state capture, just corruption, then the corruption cases could have been litigated in front of the court, and that could have, by the way, influenced the people's assessment as well. So you are right that afterwards, of course, corruption cements the political power, and then goes vice versa. But the first thing, and I think it was a project by design, and I am referring here to a statement of Orban from the early 2000 years, when he was not yet in power, when he said that they need, he said that they need to win only once, but with a great majority. So that in that time, I think that so in this respect, I think that there was a design of this state capture, which then enables corruption. About the awareness, so it's of course a very, very important question. I do not see much change, to tell the truth, during the pandemic and before the pandemic. So what we can observe for many years now, and it is confirmed by the data of Transparency International Global Corruption Barometer as well as the Eurobarometer surveys, that we see a strong tension between relatively high awareness of corruption. So despite the media capture, people are aware, most of the people, so I'm not saying that everybody, but around the numbers are range between 70 and 80%. So lots of people are aware of the serious corruption situation in the country, but on the other hand, they tolerate it. So there is this famous many times cited figure of the European Eurobarometer from 2020, in which the tolerance vis-à-vis corruption is the highest among all EU member states. And of course, the analytical question is how can it be reconciliated that people on the one hand are aware and on the other hand they tolerate corruption. Well, it's not easy to say, and certainly there are several factors which are in that. One is that what Deron Acemoglu wrote in this piece, which we published as well, that the so-called centralized kind of corruption, they are tolerated more by the people than the decentralized kinds of corruption. That is scientifically proven phenomenon. So these kinds of top-down, very state-governed corruption are less visible to the people than the decentralized kind of corruption. Then there are lots of people in Hungary, I would say certainly the majority, who would say that corruption is a given in the Hungarian context. So it doesn't matter who govern is a given. So they do not make a nuance between let's say this kind of over-centralized corruption and this, in this sense, an extreme type of corruption and other corruption forms. Then there might be an explanation that lots of corruption forms, for example, which Zoltán mentioned as well, the residency bond scheme, these are quite sophisticated forms of corruption in the sense that it's very hard to capture by the general public. So, and then there is this argumentation which goes among the Fidesz voters that might be corruption, it might be a bad phenomenon, but the previous government was also corrupt, and this is a legitimate kind of resource transfer towards the national bourgeoisie or the national middle class. So we should not forget that when we assess the corruption in Hungary, we do not speak primarily of the traditional forms of corruption, of briberies and kickbacks. That exist as well, we know that exists as well, but we speak of this enormous resource transfer from public money, but moreover, the nationalization of some assets from private stakeholders and then redistribution it to the cronies. So we speak of this enormous resource transfer by undermining the rule of law. So this very process, I believe we can call it corruption. This is a special kind of institutionalized, redistributive type corruption. But on the other hand, lots of Fidesz voters, I would say the majority of Fidesz voters, would say that it's a legitimate recapitalization of the new government, new ownership class, and which then trickles down to the middle class. So that's their interpretation. So that's why we have this very. So that's why overall we have an apathy vis-à-vis corruption, unfortunately, and that is our biggest challenge and the biggest challenge to everybody who care about the democracy and rule of law and corruption in Hungary, how to break this apathy. And I think there is no quick fix, as we can see over the years, but one thing can be is to show the economic downsides of this corruption. And in my assessment, this breakthrough, what you were mentioning, in the Hungarian context will come when people will experience or will perceive on their pockets that something went wrong. Until that, it's very hard to put through the anti-corruption messages.
Well, I'm trying to answer all three topics. And, well, first of all, can anyone tell me in the room the ideology of Viktor Orban? What is the ideology? I mean, when we look around European politics and politicians, and we point at somebody, we point at Daniel Freund, we know his ideology. When we point at someone else, we know that person's ideology. What is Orban's ideology, who started his career back in the communist youth movement in the 1980s? Then he came the vice president of Liberal International as a liberal. Then he became a decent center-right politician. Later became a conservative. Now, with introducing the price controls in Hungary, he has gone a full circle of introducing some kind of communism again. What's his ideology besides kleptocracy? And it comes to the chicken and egg problem on the political level, in his case. Even back then, in his first government, there were corruption cases. But it wasn't as professional. Can I say it professional? It wasn't as professional as nowadays, in the last decade. But honestly, yeah, systemic. Honestly, I don't think that Orban has any kind of ideology besides kleptocracy. It's all about the money. And it's all about what József mentioned, cementing his power. When he wins an election, what's he going to do the next day? Start a campaign to win the next election. And he doesn't care about the rest. Coming to the second comment, Roland, that you made, how it should be handled, and I strongly agree with Daniel. I mean, you can't overlook the fact that Hungary and Poland have been, well, say, on the wrong side of the stick, basically. And they should be handled the way they are. I mean, look at where appeasement leads. Look at where appeasement of, for example, Russia has led the European Union to. Look at what the appeasement might lead to if we don't do anything else but appease politicians and corrupt regimes worldwide. You have to take very strong and serious measures against a country, against politicians that are in an alliance with you. I mean, you have to obey the rules and the laws of that alliance. Otherwise, well, face the consequences. The third thing, József, you mentioned a very interesting thing about how an average Fidesz voter thinks about everything trickling down to the middle class. The bad news is that we don't have a middle class. The middle class has disappeared in Hungary, and since we don't have a middle class, this doesn't trickle down everywhere. As for the pandemic, I saw examples when the government propaganda was portraying that, yes, we are helping everybody, we are helping small enterprises, entrepreneurs, we're helping schools, we're helping children who are in dire need of having a laptop or something. It never happened. I have a lot of teachers in my family who have told me that we literally lost children. My mother-in-law is a teacher in a small village, and she said that 40% of the kids didn't have access to internet and didn't have access to online education for months. And they couldn't do anything. And these are the lost children of the pandemic. And in the government propaganda, it always appeared how helpful the government was. And when it comes to average Fidesz voters, they would think, when I'm an entrepreneur and I apply for a grant from the government, because we have to apply for a funding if you are an entrepreneur. Oh, I was unlucky not to get it. And you find out that basically at the end of the day, everybody's unlucky to get it. And everybody believing that, everybody got it except for me. I'm the unlucky one. but the system is working because we have a strong government with a strong economy, which is, sorry to use the word, which is bullshit. This campaign is showing us that the past decades propaganda of painting Hungary as a good economy is failing. Otherwise you wouldn't need price controls, but you wouldn't need communist measures to make people believe that you are the right person to lead this country.
The gentleman left, but there was one interesting remark, maybe you want to react, that how the Judit Varga, the Orban, Szijjártó, they shrug off all the criticism. They always say we have more important things to do. We have to save the children, save lives, the pandemic, despite of the fact that we have one of the highest death rates in the world, and now we have to save the peace. They always shrug this off. Plus, always there is an argumentation that we constantly live in this prolonged emergency situation. Mr. Orban loves this enabling act, which is scarily similar to the enabling act of 1933. That how do you read these signs that they really work on to even to reduce the working of the present laws? Is this a sign? Because I think this is what the gentleman wanted to ask, that how they can shrug off this criticism for so long.
So I think these statements that you quoted, these are pure propagandistic statements or the reflection of pure populism. So we shouldn't spend too much time on seeking any sense of it. I think it's just demagogy and populism to cement power. So that is. I think Orban is even more obsessed with power than the money. So somebody said that perhaps you said, Zoltán, that he is obsessed only with money. I think he is obsessed at least as much with power than with the money. And but of course the two are, as we tried to show, are interlinked. And one other aspect that we didn't say it so far, at least so bluntly, is that the whole system is built on the loyalty to the regime. So that is a very important aspect. So basically they distort not only the political institutions, capture and distort the political institutions, but also they distort the market very, very severely. And that is a very, very big problem, that there is no level playing field anymore in the market. There are some sectors which were entirely captured or partially captured by the government close players.
I don't have too much to add. I totally agree with József. The other thing is that, in my opinion, he doesn't care, and they don't care, because what they are focusing on is definitely money and, of course, power. And if you look at some cases in the past couple of years when knowingly we have had members of parliament somehow involved in corruption matters, and even evidence has surfaced, nothing is happening. These people are still in parliament because he needs the 2/3 majority. I mean, we know of people sitting there who have been securing the constitutional majority for Orban just because of this loyalty to the party and the loyalty to the regime, that what's going to happen after April the 3rd, whoever wins or loses, these people are going to be put in prison probably for a couple of years to a nice facility, and they come out, but they will have a normal life till the rest of their life, basically secured by the party, because they have fulfilled what needed to be fulfilled. That is their loyalty to the system, loyalty to the party, and securing the constitutional majority for Orban. So that's his political goal, even with the cases of corruption that have been revealed